Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and as you can tell, I have a bad sinus infection, which is why I sound like fucking hell. But I'm here, and I am joined by my wonderful co-hosts who are also here, also dealing with sickness and stress and anxiety and the general craziness of the world right now. But this is our safe haven. This is what we love to do together. So even though the universe tried to pull us apart this week, we are here for yet another episode of the Movie Bears podcast. Despite sickness, despite stress, we're here to review Onward, the new Disney Pixar film, with some amazing elements of fantasy role-playing inspiration. Can't wait to dig into that with the guys. We're also going to be talking a little bit about South by Southwest, which, as you probably heard by now, has been canceled, which means instead of being on flights to see each other right now, we're still chatting remotely, but at least we can do so with the power of video, thanks to our new broadcasting platform. We do have the live video component back, so hopefully you folks are with us and ready for the ride. Hello, welcome to those of you joining us live, to those watching through the magical magic of digital tape delay on YouTube. Hello to you if you're listening through iTunes or Spotify. Glad to have you here with us too. Let me introduce you to my co-host real quick so we can dive in. Jim Pugliafco is with us here in the virtual studio. Hey babe, how are you doing?
Hey babe, I'm good. I'm as good as can be. It's been a really tumultuous couple of weeks, and we're going to get into some of that. What's going on in the world and our community, and also personally, I mean, you're dealing with a sinus infection. I'm dealing with a head cold. Will, there's probably something going on. So we're all kind of coming into this thing, but we're here. So I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk about Onward. We're going to get into, like I said, what's been going on kind of in the bigger picture. I'm excited. So thanks. And welcome to the podcast, everyone.
Glad to have you with us, sweetheart. And Will Lindis is here too. Will, how are you doing?
Hey, I mean, as good as can be expected. I think that, like you mentioned, and we'll get into in a little more detail, right now, the two of you would be preparing for a flight. I would have picked up my badge at the convention center a couple of hours ago and would have been posting some pictures of myself with it by now. So all of those different things are sort of like reminders of what can't happen. And and of course there's reason for why it can't happen, but it stings in the moment. It stings to know that you all, the two of you, aren't going to be coming to visit me. My dogs agree. And
that's how they would have greeted us, Will, had we walked in the door tomorrow. That's exactly the greeting that we'd get.
You would have had Whataburger or kolaches in hand as my dogs came to greet you, and then we dropped off your suitcases and then scurried over to get in line for a world premiere. We don't get to do those things, but we do get to sit here from the comfort of our own homes and connect with one another today. And I think that's what's important, is that we still get a chance to do this thing that we love, sort of like rain or shine. We're still here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, Will, here's what we'll have to do. We'll all have to enjoy a Whataburger lunch tomorrow and just, FaceTime as we eat lunch or something and pretend. But, well, I'm definitely jazzed to get into the movie discussion with y'all, but I feel like we should talk a little bit about the South by situation and what's going on there. And Will, I know South by is so close to all of our hearts, but you living in the heart of hearts, being in Austin, Texas, I can think of no better person maybe for those of our listeners who are not familiar with what's going on. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the situation, what happened, and then we can kind of expand from there on our thoughts.
Absolutely. So, little bit of backstory. South by Southwest is an annual film, music, and interactive festival here in Austin, Texas. It's been going on for decades. And the three of us have been covering it for, what did we say, 7-8 years, something like that. Yeah. As a group, we've had a really great relationship with the team at South by Southwest. They've just been nothing but wonderful to us as sort of a fledgling, very like niche audience podcast. They've been more than gracious to us, and we've enjoyed everything that they've put forward. Well, through the COVID-19 crisis and everything that's sort of been escalating over the last few weeks, there's been a lot of questions and speculation. Is South by going to happen? What's going to happen? And we finally got confirmation on Friday, March 6th, when our mayor basically, and for good reasons, declared that, national emergency right now. We don't have any cases of, active cases of COVID-19 in Austin. We still don't, knock on wood. But at the same time, when you have that many tens of thousands of people, I guess hundreds of thousands of people flying into one area, sharing music venues together, standing in lines together, sharing film venues together, all of those different things help propagate disease and illness. And so because the state of emergency was declared, that means that South by Southwest was effectively canceled. So even worse, in the fallout from that, we found out that South by Southwest's insurance doesn't cover all of the different costs that they're out now, because you're not just talking about badge costs. Honestly, badge costs are they're significant to us as attendees, but from their overall marketing thing, it's sort of a drop in the bucket. There's so many different things that they have to pay out, including hotels for different people that are staying, the different venues that are rented out and booked, operations costs, marketing, all of these different things are now paid out with none of that money funneling back in. And unfortunately, as a result of this, South by Southwest had to lay off close to a third of their staff. The last count that I got was somewhere around 50 plus employees out of their 175 that they had to be laid off. And it's something that, South by doesn't take any joy in that. The employees, I think for the most part, understand that it's sort of beyond their control, but it's devastating for me as being a part of this community and knowing that these people are many of who, some of who I know, some of who I know more in they do more of a volunteer type thing. And they're also sort of out here, but they are scrambling now. And they have to. We've lost probably about $300 to $400 million of local business revenue as well, from people that were going to be going to the bars, going to the shops, going to the museums, going to the restaurants, and those different things while they're here. So it's devastating. It hurts us. We were looking forward to going, and we're going to commiserate about how much it sucks that we're not going to be able to do this festival. But at the same time, this thing has such wide stretching as consequences to the people of this community, the people that put it on, and you understand why they would cancel it, but it's still the consequences still hurt. Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just thinking about the complexity and the scope of the event and the impact of this cancellation. And yes, I think we all realize that it is, I want to say up front, it is, and I think it was absolutely the right and logical move that they had to make. Super tough decision, knowing all of the ramifications of doing it. But I think it's a good thing for general public health, that they had to do it. And we've seen since then several big events. And we're just mainly focusing on this one event and the impacts to that. But think about doing this to several big events. We're talking about, NCAA tournaments and Disneyland and all that stuff. We're seeing basically closing down of all public gatherings and large gathering spots. But yeah, I think what breaks my heart is, besides not being able to go, and something that we as movie lovers look forward to every year, watching those 30 some odd movies in a week, and just the sheer joy of that, and meeting up with other film friends from all over the world that we would talk to about these movies, It's a unique environment, and we've mentioned this before to people. Like, if you have a chance to go to a film festival later, when this, God willing, we get a grip on this virus thing, go to a film festival and you'll feel what we're missing out on. But more than that, like as Will mentioned, I mean, people's livelihoods are in the balance here, especially they're in Austin, where they depend on something. This is probably the biggest event of the year in Austin, I'm guessing. But we have, just think of the staff of the convention center itself, all the way down to people that do the setups and maintain the lights and keep the facilities clean, and the food vendors. All of that's gone for a year. So it'll be 2 years in between, possibly 2 years between the last one that was held last year and hopefully next year. Hopefully the event can recover. I pray that they do, because I can't imagine an event like South by Southwest not existing in my life. I mean, for 1 year, for the sake of public safety, I think we can accept that. Well, as hard as it is, I think we can understand it. But I hope to whoever that this festival bounces back even better than ever next year. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
And that's the big question, right? Is what does next year look like? Unfortunately, they had to lay off a third of their staff. 50 people, and that's big. Anybody who wasn't working on something, immediate, may have been laid off, and so, it begs the question. I don't even think we know the financial situation and how it's going to fall out from here. You don't want to believe the rumor mill, of course, and we don't want to propagate things that aren't true. But I do worry about, potential bankruptcy and like what could happen if that happens. And so, Will, you mentioned earlier, South by Southwest Film has been a phenomenal supporter of the show. They've invited us the last several years to come in as press, and we've really enjoyed covering the festival. And, we love promoting that event because they do amazing things. And I'm right there with you guys. I just hope that, with everything that's happening, they're able to recover. And next year, around this time, we're making our way to Austin to meet you, Will, for kolaches and pup time and movies and seeing, Scott and staying in your new home, which isn't quite so new anymore. It's been a year. It'll be 2 years by the time we get up there next time. It's hard to believe, isn't it?
I think I need to double check, but now that I'm thinking about it, I think today is actually the year of the move-in date. I've got to double check, but it was right, or the close date, that is.
Yeah. Well,
it was during this. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember last year, the day that we left, because we had time to kill. We went to this really cool shop in some out of the way mall that Nakia told us about. Friend of the show, Nakia from The Voice, told us about this really cool place that had Godzilla stuff. And anyway, we found that cool light up unicorn thing, and we came to see you guys in the house. And I think you had the downstairs furniture moved in, and that was just about it. Oh, and Black Widows in the light fixture above the back porch. I remember that.
Yes, we were still in. I mean, yeah, we were. I think this time last year we were. I think we had just gotten the first set of furniture maybe moved over. I think we maybe even still had a card table that we were eating. We were still in the very much move in. Not even all the boxes have been moved over yet stage. I mean. Yeah. The thing about South by Southwest and sort of its importance in the film community is okay, so we generally, from a review perspective, a lot of the ones that we sort of showcase are going to be the big sexies, because those are the films that are probably going to play at at most cineplexes across the United States. And we're glad to be able to do those big world premieres, doing things I think we did A Quiet Place 2 years ago, and we did Us last year. These are pretty heavy hitter films, all things considered, and they get a good a clout bump from kind of the festival buzz and all of that stuff. But I think just as damaging, and maybe even more so in some ways, South by Southwest is a platform for up and coming filmmakers who have not yet, maybe a lot of whom don't even have distribution yet for their films. They've taken out loans, they've borrowed from friends, they've done a second mortgage on their house just to bankroll this film, like this passion project. And then through the festival circuit, of which South by Southwest is a significant part, they're able to sell this to a studio, to a distributor, who can then help them recoup their losses and actually turn that thing into a profitable film. And now one of the things that breaks my heart about this is a lot of those filmmakers are in scramble mode, and they're doing some pretty creative things. They're looking for streaming opportunities. They are looking for different ways where they can do like, well, what if we're just going to send some links out to some, but it's not going to be the same. No. And it is going to affect their bottom line. And the ones that do try to say, well, I'm going to just try to get into another film festival later on in the year, now those film festivals have way more submissions for that same number of slots, and so people are going to get squeezed out there. So it's very unfortunate to see that. I mean, again, we're in a position where like we can, like I'm grumpy about the thing, not because of anyone doing it, just because it's a thing that's important for me, but it's important for us on the show. But at the end of the day, like, this doesn't really like hurt our bottom line. We are film fans who have safety nets and use this as an opportunity to showcase our love and to help highlight and elevate. But there are some people that are going to be financially hit very, very hard by this, and it just breaks my heart, to see that.
Yeah, we're fortunate. And of course, we're talking about, we're focusing on the impacts to South by Southwest and the films and filmmakers and others involved with the festival. But that's really just a microcosm of what's kind of happening right now, nationwide and worldwide. There are, we're seeing, like I said, other big events close down too. So this is also thought to be going to be driving problems across the movie, the whole movie industry at this point, not just because we're losing this festival and this opportunity to showcase films and bring them to distribution, but even if films have distribution at this point, I think the thought is that, and we're seeing reports of this, that movie attendance is way down. So people are bumping more now. There's been kind of a slow sea change towards streaming, but this is going to be maybe be a big push in that direction. And who knows, after things hopefully settle down with the virus, how that's going to leave, movie houses and that kind of thing for distribution of films. So,
well, it's interesting. I mean, even as a temporary effect, we're seeing theater chains right now, are taking steps to do extra cleaning, and they're telling people who are sick, please not to come to our theaters. And Cinemark put out an email today, and they're like, if theater staff see people who are sick, like, they may encourage you to go home. Didn't say if they give people refunds for those tickets, but but other smaller movie chains, I mean, they're suspending operations for the time being. So, if you're thinking of going to the movies this weekend, maybe think again, because the movies may not be open. You may want to check. So, one of the things we're going to be doing on the show, at least for next week, Will had an awesome idea of maybe picking some things that are on streaming that are available right now. And that way, if you can't get to the movies this weekend, that's okay. You'll have things you can watch and we can talk about on the show next week. But, it's really starting to hit our daily lives too. I mean, I have a really bad sinus infection right now. Jim, how many times did we have to go to different Walgreens to find all the medicines I was prescribed and needed? I mean, I feel like we spent the last 3 days going to different Walgreens just trying to get basic stuff. So it's crazy. And, we want people to stay healthy and be careful and be smart. Excuse me. But I don't think we quite know what the impacts of this are right now. But I'm choosing to focus on the positive. We may not be at South by Southwest right now, guys, but we still get to watch awesome movies and get together and talk about them, or awesomely bad movies sometimes.
Yeah.
Which begs the question, is Onward an awesome movie or an awesomely bad movie? Are you gentlemen interested in maybe answering that question, sharing some thoughts?
Very much so.
I definitely want to get into Onward, and I hope people did get out to see Onward, and I hope people who are not feeling sick at all and are feeling healthy will go out and still see movies. I just really hope that happens. I'm just really anxious about how things are going on. I was in a supermarket today, and there's just something in the air, and I don't. That's not that pun was not, that pun was unintended. That pun was unintended. But there's a feeling out there of like high anxiety, like in the stores and stuff, and we've seen the stories about that. And I haven't been to them. I mean, we went to the movie theater last weekend, so I guess we were kind of at the start of this thing, and I really didn't notice much difference in the movie theater. The movie theater was pretty full, right, Brad?
I mean, yeah.
It was pretty full for Onward. But I don't know if we go to the movies this week, given that whether it's because big releases have been canceled or pushed back, or people just deciding to stay home, it could be a totally different story. But we'll see.
This one hit right under the wire too. Just this week,
Disney, at least for 1 week. Yeah.
Well, no, because Disney has has pushed all of its March and April big movies. So Mulan and New Mutants, the cursed movie, and Antlers all got pushed back to way later in the year. And I think that if Onward had released even 1 weekend afterwards, it probably would have got pulled into that too. So very glad that we were able to get to see this one when we did, just sort of, in context of everything else.
Man, this is news to me. I hadn't even heard this yet. So Mulan got pushed back.
Yeah.
What's the new release date?
Undetermined, undefined right now.
Oh my God.
Undetermined. It will happen when it happens.
Oh my God. I've been counting the days to Mulan. I know Disney, remakes, it's a divisive topic, but I've been so looking forward to that. I need a moment. I'm sorry. That hurts my heart.
And there's a non-zero chance that if this thing lasts longer than we're hoping, that there might try something funky and maybe try using Disney Plus as a way of pushing something, whether it be that or something else, through Disney Plus as a way of getting more subscribers, the people that joined up during Mandalorian and then kind of fell off afterwards because there hasn't been as much new content. This thing, Jim, you hit on this before, but kind of in context of Disney and Mulan and all of this stuff, there is a very good chance that this whole thing will be sort of a bellwether for the direction of streaming as a distribution platform, even for the big studios, as opposed to just streaming platforms themselves. This is uncharted territory.
The virus seems like a forcing function toward more towards streaming, and I'm trying to wrap my head around without these big tentpole releases, at least even early it's not even summer yet, but early in the spring, like Mulan and the Quiet Place 2 was another one that got pushed back. Without those big movies to draw people into the theater, what's it going to be like going to the theater in the next few weeks? You know what I mean? If they're still open, like what we're going to be, they're going to be playing the same movies and without an audience. It's going to be pretty awful, I think.
Well, all we can do at the moment is put the car in O for Onward and keep moving forward as best we can. Jim and Will, are you guys ready to get into our movie discussion for the week?
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this one.
Mm-hmm.
All right, awesome. Well, then we're going to go ahead and switch gears. Again, big, huge thank you to South by Southwest for being amazing. We're sorry that this is all happening and you're going through what you're going through. And we want to support you best we can. Thank you for everything you're doing. We're going to go ahead and officially segue into our Onward discussion. I'm excited to chat about this one with you guys, but I don't want to tip my John T2 hat too much on how I feel about the movie till we get to that point. So here we go. Our discussion of Onward. All right. So, Jim, I know you are a huge fan of a lot of Disney Pixar films. I see you kind of, but I'm thinking back to things like Inside Out, you really loved.
Good Dinosaur.
Cars 3, Good Dinosaur, so many great Disney Pixar films. I figure there's no one better on this podcast to introduce Onward than you. So for anyone who may be unfamiliar, because, we'll be honest, a lot of people are not super familiar with this film. It's not a franchise, extending film. It's kind of a new thing. They may not know much about it. Would you give us a brief setup for Onward? And then, of course, spoiler free. We'll give fair warning before we go into spoilers. But what do you think of the film? Worth seeing in theaters? Or maybe not seeing in theaters, catching on streaming, or skipping entirely?
Yeah, sure. So this is Pixar's latest original new movie, Onward. And it's written and directed by Dan Scanlon, starring the voice voice talent of Tom Holland, Chris Pratt, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and I think Octavia Spencer, I believe, is in this one. Is that true? Did I get that right? Yes, Octavia Spencer.
I was in the middle I was blowing my nose and on mute. I'm sorry. Yes,
no, Octavia Spencer. Lena Waithe is also in this. It's good to see her around. I'll read the plot synopsis, but then I'm going to give probably maybe a better non-spoilery synopsis based just on the trailer. Set in a suburban fantasy world, two teenage elf brothers embark on a quest to discover if there is still magic out there. So this movie is about these two brothers, Ian and Barley, who, and I'm going to, nothing I'm going to say here is spoilers if you've seen the trailer. It'll be inside the trailer, who lost their father at a young age. And they are elf. This is takes place in an elf world that is has kind of evolved just like into a more technological society, just like similar to what we have modern day. But picture ourselves, I guess, as ourselves, get it, as elves. And so that's the world we live in. And so these two brothers stumble upon a gift that their father had left for them to rediscover the magic that was once part of their world. And in doing so, they try to bring him back so that they can have some more time with their dad. I loved this movie way more than I thought I was going to. The trailers look kind of goofy and silly, and there's a lot of that in this movie, but I think this movie is so much more than that. I loved that it's an original story. Number one, I love the world that it builds and its story takes place in. Make no mistake about it, this is a quest movie, something that I normally don't like. I don't like video gamey type quest movies, and this is I don't know if it's a video game quest movie. Kind of, sort of, but it's more like maybe like a Dungeons and Dragons kind of theme quest movie that these two brothers embark on. I love the voice acting in this movie, most of it, especially the two main characters voiced by Tom Holland, who's Ian, and Chris Pratt, who's Barley, as brothers. I love the relationships that they build. I love the family dynamic with the mom, played by voiced by Julie. Oh, wow. Am I having Julia Louis-Dreyfus? I just love that, kind of the family dynamic they had. They're missing a dad, but they seem to be a fully functional family, a very loving family, and with its candid moments too. And I like the mystical, magical elements that they brought into this quest as well. And when we get into spoilers, I'm going to talk about the ending, which I thought was such a great way to subvert where a lot of people think this movie's going, and how one character kind of flips it around a little bit, and kind of shocked me a little bit. And I love the movie for doing that. And the storytellers did their homework in terms of giving us something that maybe was unexpected, in kind of resolving the story in a very satisfying but unexpected way. So yeah, I loved it. I think people, again, if you're feeling up to it, if you're not feeling sick and the movie theaters are still open, go support this movie and see it. It's worth seeing 100%.
All right, Jim. Thank you so much. Appreciate you giving us your thoughts. I'm dying on this podcast. I have to keep going on mute every 5 seconds to blow my nose and cough. So sorry for the silence.
If I come in and give you a back rub, can I get 20 more minutes out of you?
Maybe. But if I, fall out of my chair, just no.
Okay. All right.
But Will, how about you? What are your thoughts on Onward? Were you as positive as Jim on this one, or maybe not?
I was probably in an equal position to Jim going into this one to start with. The trailers, I feel, painted a picture of what to me looked like it was going to be a very sort of by the numbers, maybe like low tier Pixar film. And even low tier Pixar is better than high tier a lot of other places. But still, my expectations were fairly tempered. Even with I've been a D&D player. I just realized for 25 years, that's a long time. And so this should have been 100% my bread and butter, but just something about it just wasn't super exciting me. But then I watched the movie and I was super fucking wrong, because this is top tier Pixar and it is 100% my jam. This movie is way better than any of the trailers. And I think there's, to some degree, that's a good thing, because the trailers do a good job of setting up the stakes while not revealing what happens, the twists, the turns, the kind of the emotional stuff that comes out within the film. All of that stuff is sort of hidden from us as the audience until it happens, and I love that. This film is really great about Chekhov's everything. Every story element that gets set up pays off in some way, shape, or form, whether it be something that gets brought up, or something that's seen in focus, or something a character mentions, or something the character learns. All of these things, this is a super tightly written script with every single element weaving in and out of each other until you build up to something that is just absolutely monumental in terms of the way that it wrecked me. I had some friends in town for the weekend, my good friends Bill and Chris from San Antonio, and myself and Scott went to go see this together. And at one point in this movie, I looked to my left and Scott is just his face is just solid water. And then I look over and my friends Bill and Chris, just solid water. And I'm not a huge weeper in movies, but I was welling up too. And I'm just this hit us all very, very strongly. And it's not just because of the D&D elements. The D&D elements were super cool. This was very faithful to something that I enjoyed, fantasy, and kind of the way that you gamify fantasy, without also being beholden to something super specific. It turned those things into something that was unique within this world and that serviced the story and never got in the way of the emotional right across that's coming your way. That's always what this film is about, is it's building towards those character moments and how these characters interact with one another, just in this crazy, fun, interesting, unique, fantastical world. Honestly, this is top tier Pixar for me. I loathe to do an actual where I rank them list, but coming out of it, I was like, I would not be too hard pressed if I were to like say like, you know, top 5 overall for me, just in terms of just how well constructed this thing is. Super hyperbolic, I know, but I love this movie.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm glad you loved it so much. Brad, if you're ready, give us your quick opinion, and then we'll dive in a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, Will, super hyperbole is allowed once in a while, but you only get so much. So I'm marking it down on my list. I'm keeping track. I'm just kidding. I know exactly what you're saying, though. Like, the trailer for this movie trailers did not excite me. It looked silly. It looked goofy. It looked dumb. But it's Disney Pixar. Disney Pixar has usually not led me wrong. But I was going into this movie thinking, this is going to be the one that's going to do it. And boy, could I not have been more wrong. And I think that's the problem. Like, marketing sometimes, like, gosh, they're there to get butts in the seats, and talking about sad movies about dead parents usually probably doesn't get a lot of kid butts in the seats, right? So they had to amp up a lot of that silly, fun stuff in the trailer. But I'm really glad that we did end up going to see this. I kind of drug my feet seeing this over the weekend. I was dealing with some sickness, and I ended up kind of being glad we didn't go see it when we originally planned to, because I was like, I don't want to see this movie while I'm like dying in the seat. Thankfully, I felt a lot better the next day before I felt a lot worse again. And this movie was like a shot of chicken soup in the arm that I didn't even know that I needed. I don't know if you guys remember those Chicken Soup for the Soul books.
Oh, yeah.
They were like a thing in the 90s, but this was that for me, you know. Not to get too deep into it, but having lost a parent, I related a lot with this film. And Will, like you, I've been a D&D player for a long time. Before I played D&D, I was a Magic the Gathering player. I'm a recent Gloomhaven player. And the version of the game in this movie is kind of a blend of all three of those things. And so there was just so much that I was nerding out over the whole movie. But beyond that, the emotional story that it tells, the relationship between these two brothers, the relationship with their mom, you know, they're like weekend at Bernie's like dad thing. I don't know. On paper, it doesn't sound like it would be that endearing, but holy hell, it punched me in the stomach in a great way, if that's possible. And I just realized this is how off my game I am this week, guys. I'm sorry. I had the chat covered up. So I missed Adrian Charlie in the fucking house. Hey, Adrian. Welcome. Glad to have you here. He said he was very much ugly crying during this film. And you know what, Adrian? I was too. I cried at several points, and not just because of sadness, but happiness too. And those happy cries are always the ones that get me, because I feel like it's easy to like play the violin and tug on your sad heartstrings, but making you cry out of happiness is a special thing. And this movie gave that to me as a gift. So I don't want to expound on things too much. I know we're going to get into spoilers here in a little bit. But yeah, this is a big, huge win for me. Whether you get a chance to go out and see this this weekend, I know with like movie chains and stuff temporarily suspending operations, your chances may be limited. Hopefully, you know, you can still get out and see it if you haven't already. But I'm sure it'll be out on streaming pretty soon. If not, whether you see it in theaters, whether you stream it, whether you Redbox it, just use your hand sanitizer after you operate those icky screens. Please see Onward, because it's amazing. And more people also need to get into fucking D&D and Gloomhaven. That's all I'm going to say on that.
I know, Brad. And I know there's just a lot to this movie that I think people can attach to. You guys attach to the fantasy game kind of role-playing stuff that was going on, because one of the characters, Barley, the older brother, is very much into that. And the way they created this, I forget if they had a name for it. It wasn't called Dungeons and Dragons in the movie. It had, but I believe it had a name. But just kind of the way they created the elements of this game that they peppered into the movie made you believe that is a real thing. It's just, oh my God, it's just like Dungeons and Dragons. But the other thing that I liked is the characterization of Barley, the brother, who I think, is probably the more interesting character here, is he loves rock and roll. Like he embodies a lot of guys or kids that I might have known, like even back when I was in high school, back in ancient times, like listening to rock and roll, who had a van that he had tricked out, or customized with the giant mural on the side. The van was like a character in this movie, actually, which I thought was kind of cool too.
Guinevere.
And right. And just kind of this Barley character, just kind of the passion that he had both for his stuff in the game stuff, and for his van, and just a really, really likable character. So I mean, that's just one of the things that I really loved about this movie.
Yeah, because this is a story ultimately about these two brothers, right? Ian and Barley, voiced by Tom Holland as Ian and Chris Pratt as Barley. So Spider-Man and Star-Lord got together, and what's so great is this is a set of characters.
They met in a tavern.
They met in a tavern. They got their trusty, rusty steed Guinevere, and they ventured off towards adventure, quest, glory, and infamy. And what I like so much about these two characters, though, is that I think Disney's been doing a really good job of late of realizing that there are more types of relationships than romantic or henchman, boss, like sidekick type things, which is what we had for the longest time. You would predominantly have a character, a romantic partner, and then like the sort of like the Sebastians and the Flounders and the Gargoyles and the Abus, like all of the different support characters whose job it was to like prop up the ones in the relationship. But here's a story about two brothers on an adventure. This isn't the story about them like questing for love. This is about the two of them trying to, as the trailers say, deal with something going on with their father. And I think that that's such a compelling way to look at stories. And we've seen so many of those lately that have done something similar to it. Frozen, very famously, is a story about the two sisters, and even Inside Out is a story about both friendship and about like mood and emotion. And I love that we're seeing more of these nuanced stories that explore different facets of these very human relationships, even if none of them actually feature humans. This is a story about elves and manticores and all sorts of different creepy crawler monster type things. And yet they feel so very human because of the way they're characterized.
Yeah. And the other thing about this movie that I kind of noticed, and some of the ones you even mentioned, Will, is that they really don't have, well, some of them do, but this one doesn't have really a villain. Like this movie doesn't really have a main villain. There are obstacles that they have to overcome along the way, but there's no like overlord villain. So it isn't really a good versus evil kind of story. At least to me, I didn't see an overall villain in this movie.
I mean, metaphorically, and the trailer sets this up, I would almost argue that the antagonist is time itself. But you're right. There's not like a mustache twirling or tentacle twirling Ursula. Like
they don't have like an embodiment, like a characterized embodiment of evil whose goal is evil. They have obstacles. They do have like an antagonizing forces, but they are all generated by scenario instead of by evil for evil's sake.
Yeah. I also wanted to just give a shout out before I know we have to switch to spoilers very soon, but I wanted to give a shout out to my husband Brad, who instantly identified the composer for the score of this movie. Like very early in the movie, without even knowing, he's like, I know that music, and that is Michael Dana from The Life of Pi and The Good Dinosaur. And I'm like, and I'm listening, I'm like, could be, maybe. Oh yeah, I think it is. And sure enough, it was after we looked it up at the end. And I loved the score of this movie. I thought the score was really, really well done. in terms of like supporting this kind of fantasy world. Michael Dana kind of uses a lot of like
wind chimes.
Eastern influences in his music. Island influences in his music, and it really worked for the score as well.
He likes his wind chimes and horns, and I'm all about that. Hashtag wind chimes and horns. Babe,
sitars and
horny for wind chimes.
Thank you for the shout out. Yeah, that was a team effort though. I knew it was that composer, but I wasn't sure of his name. And when I said that to you, you're like, oh yeah, Michael Dan. So like that was like a 1-2 combo partnership punch. But yeah, I really like the score as well. I don't think the score is as strong as Life of Pi or The Good Dinosaur. Like I can't immediately think of a like a recurring motif or anything that comes to mind. But also that said, I've only listened to those other two soundtracks about 1,000 times. I haven't bought the soundtrack for this movie yet, but that reminds me, Jim. That reminds me. I did like the score a lot, and I do want to pick it up. So thank you for reminding me. I've been a little off my game since I've been sick. So, but yeah, I mean, some really good stuff with the music in this movie. Also, some rock too. Like you mentioned Guinevere being a character, the van. Like I think the music and the environment inside Guinevere, like it makes me want to have a really cool airbrushed van and. I don't even like fans, so there you go.
Yeah, that's the element of kind of classic D&D that I never got to experience because I wasn't a teenage gamer in like the late 70s, early 80s when you had sort of like the Stranger, like what you see in like Stranger Things, like that group of D&D kids. I didn't have the airbrushed van. Like I came into it afterwards, because just, that's the way time works. But the people like that generation of gamers 100% exists and were a lot of like the gamers sort of my age, like they were sort of mentors, like shepherding us into kind of the next one. Like I've played with, especially when I was younger, right out of high school and looking for different like gaming groups. I've played with several like wizenbeard old, like leather jean jacket wearing like pseudo hippie gamers who like were just absolute fantastic storytellers and absolute great sort of ports of entry for this passion. I know we got spoilers soon, but the one question I have that's sort of pre-spoilers is sort of a side question. Did you guys like the short that came with this one?
No, hold on. Before we even talk about the short, did you just say you had a side quest?
I do have a side quest.
Because talking about the short feels like a side quest before we get back to the main quest.
It's true.
We have to answer the side question before we can feel like our elves.
Oh.
See, we keep going back to the elves pun one, and I don't know. Like, I'm not saying no, but I am groaning.
Okay.
So,
I don't know that.
Oh God, I didn't mean that. That was not a. Okay. That was an accidental pun.
Real quick, I love that this movie works on levels for different viewers, right? So people may go into this thinking it's a kids movie, and there were a lot of kids. We went to a matinee show. There were a lot of kids in the matinee show, and I think for the as much as I could tell, I think the kids probably enjoyed the hell out of this movie. But this movie works on an adult level as well. We saw a movie. What was the movie we saw recently? The animated one, the live action Sonic the Hedgehog. Right. That to me was a kids movie. It was purely a kids movie about the character and his exploits and stuff. This movie had, and yes, there was some messages in Sonic the Hedgehog, like themes like loneliness and stuff that I think work mostly for the kids. But I thought this movie, just like a lot of Pixar movies, they work on a lot of levels and they're really aimed at adults, even though it may appear like a kid's, a story set for kids. kind of on the surface. So, this movie does what Pixar does best. Will, I agree with you. I think it's, to me, it's top tier Pixar. I just don't know if it's going to go down and be remembered that way, in spite of what's going on.
And Will, it is interesting that you bring up, because I do want to circle back to your side question. It's interesting that you bring up the short. Is it a spoiler to talk about what the short is? Because I had no idea going in.
I don't think it's.
I didn't know what it was either, but I don't know. We're not going to spoil anything about other than what I don't know. Yeah,
we're going to talk, because the thing is that if people don't go see it, then they're not going to be able to see the short unless they track it down separately. So I think as long as we don't say here's what happens explicitly throughout the story, I think it's okay to talk about. All right,
so it's a Simpsons short. Now that Disney owns the Fox television properties and movie properties, they're able to do Simpsons stuff, and so it's a cute little story. But I do kind of feel robbed of a cute original story that's not a franchise
a Pixar short. Yeah,
I was hoping for my Piper, I was hoping for my Bow. Instead I got the Simpsons, and while I like the Simpsons, don't get me wrong, it's not quite the same thing, so I have mixed feelings. Honestly,
it was a little bit of a twist on the Simpsons, given that it was a wordless short, if I remember correctly. And that's kind of a cool twist on the usual Simpsons. But I was disappointed that we didn't have an opportunity to get, an original Pixar short, something new, something fresh, something maybe groundbreaking, like Piper was with the animation. And you got to wonder what the Pixar guys were thinking. Like was this a boardroom decision? Like, oh, we got to put a Simpson short in front of this because we got to plug. I don't know. It didn't seem like a creative decision. It seemed more like there might be some business behind it. I don't know.
There's no way that the Pixar people said, you know what, let's pass on this one and just do a Simpsons thing instead, because the Pixar shorts have been, well, okay, I'm going to walk all of that back and say the Pixar shorts have been such an integral part of all of these features, and many, if not most of them, have gone on to become Oscar nominated or Oscar winning. That said, the thing that I did just sort of realize is through Disney Plus, they have a Pixar short series that they're doing right now. And so they might be funneling their sort of their up and coming talent that direction. And also because they want to welcome Simpsons to the Disney family, it made a lot of sense for them, probably from a put it up on the whiteboard perspective, to not dilute where the Pixar shorts are and to pull this over here. For me, though, I wasn't a huge fan of it. While I will say that this was probably the best Simpsons thing that we've seen in years, the show has just absolutely gone off the rails. But this short, at least I felt like the character that was focused on was at least fully realized within the context of the short and within the story within the short. I think all of that was good. I just think it felt very out of place here. I would have rather seen this with and I know the line is a little bit fuzzy, but I would rather have seen this particular short in front of a Disney feature than in front of a Pixar feature.
100% agree, Will. Yep.
100%.
It was an odd choice, but as the short played out, I thought it was kind of cute. It was fun. I'm not a regular Simpsons watcher, so it was good to kind of be drawn back into just a little corner of that world and see a couple of a little character story in the Simpsons. And we don't really, at least from what I remember, it seemed totally and tonally a little bit different than what we normally get with Simpsons.
Indeed. All right. Well, congratulations. Each of you got 20 experience points for our side quest in talking about the Simpsons short. Congratulations. You also find 7 gold, a minor potion of healing, and a cloak of invisibility. Use them well. But we're going to go ahead and
jump. So hard right now, Brad.
I knew you'd get a nerd boner, Will. But I'm gonna go ahead and if you guys are good, let's go ahead and shift gears back to our main quest. I know we want to get to some spoiler discussion for Onward before we look to wrap up here in a bit. And before I fall into a heaping pile of sickness in my bed, hopefully not too long from now. So for everybody who has not yet seen Disney Pixar's Onward, normally I say, you know, listen at your own peril to spoilers. But man, this movie's just so good. I almost want you to just tune off and like come back after you see it. But that is, as ever, your choice to make. But we are going to be talking spoilers here. So get ready. It's about to happen starting right now. Spoilers are totally fair game. What do you guys think of this this conceit of having the dad come back for 24 hours, but only come back halfway and be able to communicate with his feet? And we don't really know. I mean, he can't really hear, but he can feel vibrations. Did that work for you? Was that a little weirdly hamstrung? I mean, what was the what was your take?
I thought bringing the dad back provided some, even his bottom half, lower half, whatever they want to call it, provided some really great moments. I think with the communication of the tapping on the shoe, right? You know, dump, da 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 dump, whatever, tapping on the shoe, and then there was a dancing scene that I thought was really cute and you know, a really kind of uplifting little dancing scene, and then but then after that, I think that it mostly turned the dad into more of like a MacGuffin almost, kind of to be brought through the rest of the movie until the end, when things, you know, when the spell was finally brought to fruition, not for 24 hours as they had hoped, but you know, they had 24 hours to bring the dad back, and then the spell would be broken. And of course, it was only in the last few minutes that they were able to execute the spell. And what I loved about it, and what kind of destroyed me at the same time, was how the younger brother, realized that two things. First, that maybe it wasn't his dad that he really didn't know that he was longing for, as much as just having a brother like Barley to kind of guide him along in life. And that was a very important thing to him. And not only that, but having some time back with the dad to close the loop for Barley, you know, making that sacrifice to stand off and let that happen kind of at a distance, I thought was just a wonderful story touch, the way that went down. You know, because you expected the dad to be there and to talk to the kids and, you know, hug them both. But that didn't happen that way. But yet still it was completely satisfying, I think, in a totally different way. So I love the way the movie did that.
Can I tell kind of a sad story for a second?
Go ahead.
Yeah, sure.
That really hit me hard. Him, and I will try not to get emotional. If my eyes are watery, it's because I'm sick. That really hit me hard about him allowing his brother to have the time, you know, with his dad. When my mom was passing, in the last couple of days, she went into kind of a morphine sleep coma thing, and you know, just before she passed, they had told us, like, you know, she's not going to wake up anymore. Like, you've had your time with her. And an hour before she passed, she did wake up again. And I was the only one in the room. Everybody else had gone off to do other things, and she was awake and alert. And I got a chance to start talking with her a little bit. And I could have kept that time with her for just me, you know. But like, my brother and my sister were in other rooms, and I'm like, oh my God, they need to come in. And so I called them in, and they got to have more time with her than I did. And part of me was angry at myself, because I was like, man, like, if I had just had a couple more minutes with her, there were more things that I wanted to say. But seeing them be able to have that time was huge. And so this movie really, really connected with me, and I loved seeing the Ian character. You know, it wasn't intentional in that he decided to stand away. right? Like situationally, he was like fighting that dragon thing and he got caught in the rubble, but he could see through like a small opening. But I thought that was so cool how like he ended up being okay, like doing that. And I don't know, like you don't find shit like that typically in a kids movie. That is really heavy emotional stuff. And so I just, I really have to give it to Disney Pixar. Like every freaking movie, they bring these gut punches. And Will, you mentioned earlier, like, Jim too, like other relationships that aren't just like spouse and spouse or man and woman, like I think it's so special that they flesh these things out like this. So this movie, I don't know, it's a treasured gift. I'm so glad we have it in the world.
I can definitely see how that could resonate with you. Yeah, after sharing that story, Brad. Thank you. Yeah.
I think that they did a really good job of actually showcasing the father himself, both in showing kind of like what you see and what you don't see with him. Because I think that this movie would have taken on a completely different tone. And the impact at the end would have been, less realized if you make the entire exact same story. The two brothers are on the quest to go do the go do the father spell, but they don't have that portion of them with them, because I think the whole time we would have been wondering as audiences, like, oh, is the spell even going to work? Like, is this all just a pipe dream? But instead, they have this proximity. They're like the entire movie. They are so close to this thing that they want, and they kind of have what they want, but they also don't fully have it. And I think that's what makes their quest all the more compelling, all the more fulfilling, all the more tragic, all the more sincere, as all of those different elements at the end come together. And I love that we end up with a story here that's about, this isn't just about the time spent with the father, although that is such a huge part of it, and that's such an important part of it for both Barley and for Ian for different reasons, one of whom had known the father and one of which had never, and was resentful that he didn't have any of those memories. But this is also a movie about the unconditional, the non-traditional relationships that stem in the absence of a family member. And I think that was so compelling too. The Barley becomes a father figure for Ian throughout his entire life, nurturing him, teaching him, teasing him, playing with him, becoming this supportive figure. And Ian's quest is not to find his father at the end. It's to realize that he sort of had a father figure the whole time along. And and that's, I think we can all come to this movie from different perspectives. I'm more in that camp, in having not had a father figure in my life. Well, let me rephrase that. Having not had a father in my life, but being raised by my mother and my grandparents. And so my grandfather was my father figure growing up. And I know, end of last year was really brutal. He was in a coma for about 6 weeks there, and it was just absolutely and he's, miracle recovery. It's like it's amazing where he's at now. But it was very scary for all of kind of October and November for all of us, and for me it was in that same boat, because this was a person who was in that exact same role, in that father role for me. And it wasn't exactly a father itself, but it checked every single one of the boxes that would have been on my list.
Right.
Literally. Right.
And so that's what I love about the way they told this story is, I think, Brad, you and I have two different points of entry for this story and the way that it wrecked us.
Yeah.
From two very different angles. And I think that because of the way the story was told, here, knowing the people that saw it with me, hearing Adrian, hearing everyone, I think that there's something very universal about this style of story that makes it to where it can feel both it can feel incredibly personal to a lot of different people that would watch it. And that sort of storytelling is very rare. And I think that's why I'm a little frustrated that people are sort of sleeping on this one, because I think this one has all of those hallmarks of kind of one of the greats,
Yeah, and I hope people do get to see it and recognize it for that. And besides the kind of the ultimate moment at the end and the big emotional crescendo at the end, it's funny because you're getting to the end and things are happening really fast and you're wondering where's the emotional punch going to come, and then you're like, oh, I see how it's setting up. You know, the dad's going to appear, but only one brother is going to get an opportunity to spend just a few moments with him. And that moment was used for something that was set up earlier in the film, where Barley had been carrying around this shame or I guess shame or regret for when his dad passed away, and he had an opportunity to spend time with him while the dad was dying. He opted not to, right? He didn't. He felt afterwards he resented that for a long time. He regretted it, and so he got his chance to make his closure, and so that also added to that emotional gut punch, seeing that happen. But there was a few other moments in the film. Like, I recently got a new vehicle, and that means I had to trade in my old vehicle that I had, right? And there's a scene in this movie where Barley has to sacrifice Guinevere, right, for in order to make an escape, right, so they could continue with their quest. And the way it was played, I was like, oh my God, I'm getting a little upset and a little bit sad about him having to give up his vehicle and sacrifice his vehicle over the cliff for it. And it's just a car. It's it's just it's a testament, I think, to the storytelling here, the way they kind of set up this car as like a character. That scene really worked for me.
Yeah, and I can totally see that, Jim, because Guinevere is such a character, in her own right, and the combination of just Gwen as a man, but also like Barley putting the tape in and the epic music, and it's just this incredible send off for Guinevere. And I think back to old vehicles I've had in the past too, like. They kind of become a member of your family in a way, even though they're an inanimate object. Like, you spend a lot of time in them, and I could totally see that happening. And so I like what they ended up doing with that moment. They didn't make it, I don't know, too silly or too crazy.
Right. They didn't make the car talk like in Cars 3. That's
it was just enough, and I thought, like, as much as I love, Kit, my Mustang, like, gosh, if I had to like send Kit off a cliff in order to, I don't know, save our lives, I would totally do it, but I'd be pretty sad about it. We've had a lot of adventures in Kit, so I get it.
Yeah. The only nit that I have with this movie is that while I loved Octavia Spencer, and I love her and everything she does, and Julia Louis-Dreyfus, JLD. As the mom, and I kind of like the mom character. I just didn't think that side plot worked out like, it just felt a little silly and tacked on. It was I don't know, it just didn't resonate as much with me as the rest of the story did. It didn't seem to have much gravity really at all.
Yeah, it was a little underdeveloped in that, like, they didn't have a lot to do until they suddenly had a lot to do. And I would say it's more of a nit for me. Like, I don't think that it's something that like disrailed the movie at all.
Right.
But if I were to say like what was one of the weaker parts of the story, I do think I love Octavia Spencer, but Corey, the Manticore,
OS, we call
like it. OS. I think that Corey's story is, like, she has a character arc and growth, but it definitely feels much more like they kind of did that one in reverse compared to the others. Just like, oh, here's what the arc is, so we'll just say that this is how she got there. We did have LGBTQ representation in this film in a way that is more direct than in pretty much any other Disney movie to date. So while it's not a lot, it's still there and present, and in a
You're not talking about the sprites, are you?
not the
No.
sprites.
Remember the female police officer when she's talking to what she thinks is the centaur cop. It's like, my girlfriend's kids got me like, and she directly references her girlfriend, and she seems to present as female, so it seems like, you know, a gay relationship.
And that's the Lena Waithe character.
Yeah.
So she, you know, she references having a girlfriend and having kids, and like no one's reaction is like, huh, really? Or anything like that.
Yeah.
Everyone in this fantasy world is just like, cool. You gave me that piece of information, and it makes sense. So I'm just going to carry on, as you know. And I think that's a great way for representation. Like I want more protagonist support. This was definitely a very side scene-y type character, and that's not enough in the grand scheme of things. But I do think that having representation that is sort of matter of fact and within the story, as opposed to calling attention to itself, is also admirable, and it's a huge step forward.
Yeah, and
even if there's more steps to come.
And the way it worked is, like you said, Will, it was nobody was taken aback by what she said. It seemed to come natural in the conversation. That, you know, she's got a girlfriend and she's got kids, and that. But I mean, being elves or creatures as opposed to people, right? Kind of played perfectly with that, right? I mean, that, you know, here's a society where, you know, individuals of the same sex can have a family, you know what I mean, without the shame, without the, you know, the stigma associated with it. So that was beautiful.
I agree. I do think it's unfortunate, though. A lot of people are really bashing this movie for being half-assed with the LGBTQ A+ representation, saying that the girlfriend line was a throwaway line and it wasn't enough. And I think that's problematic because, you know, when you're making a kids movie, there's a fine line. You have to walk with some of these things. And I feel like with each of these movies to come out, maybe we're getting closer and closer and closer to that being able to be like a full-blown thing. But I feel like we also have to celebrate the small wins, even if they're not as big as we'd like them to be. So, you know, kudos for being so blatant about it, even if it was just a short moment. I hope it leads to bigger moments down the road.
And I think what you're saying, Brad, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that if you're a film studio, you have to walk that line, not because it's not the right thing to do, right? But because it's a self-preservation thing within the market and the audience, right? Because if you, as much as we may think it's the right thing to do and we want to see more of it, they're still walking that marketing line of trying to keep their product seen as acceptable to a wider audience, right? And that's the struggle we're in, right? With movies is you know, we're still not there yet. We probably won't be there for several more generations, but we're making strides, right? You'd never see this in a movie previously, you know.
Yeah,
so.
I think that's what's important, is that I think that we can celebrate small wins while also sort of holding these big studios accountable for that's not enough. That's not enough. That doesn't mean that what you did was bad in this case, but that those aren't our scraps. That's not where this stops. This is where it starts. Because otherwise, then we get things like LeFou from Beauty and the Beast, which were much more problematic for me because they were very cut-outable and also very insulting in their presentation. This was good. This was good. Enough, not in the grand scheme of things, but within the context of this film, yes. But Pixar, Disney, you owe me more going forward. So this is the first of the steps.
Well, get ready. There is a LeFou Gaston series coming to Disney Plus. It takes place before Beauty and the Beast. So
That's
How's
going to
that
be
gonna-
the straightest show ever.
What if the mom and the Manticore had kind of formed a relationship throughout their, thing? And didn't they kind of like? Weren't they talking about going out to get
They're like
afterwards?
like I think that
Yeah.
the fact that he's still with Mel Rodriguez's Colt Bronco at the end, I think that that's very much coded as a monogamous heterosexual relationship. So that's just, I think what was with that was just a, and in a lot of ways this is good too. We have two female characters who, granted, are support characters, but they're primary support characters. And they're able to develop a meaningful relationship with one another that's not sexual or romantic in nature. It's two women who enjoy adventuring together and are friends. And I think that that's cool too.
That is cool.
Because most of the time, the woman in a lot of these stories is only there for romantic subplot type things. So I appreciated that. Could that have been like a love story? Sure. But I'm also cool with what we got for it.
As long as it doesn't veer too far into girls trip territory, I think we're okay.
You mean the Manticore is like flying between two buildings and accidentally shits all over everybody?
Yeah,
that's it. That's downward.
Well, only because it's been done to death and never really that great. So, yeah.
Well, I think it's safe to say we all loved this movie a lot. I actually kind of want to see this movie again. It was funny. I was playing Gloomhaven today with a couple of friends, and the whole time I'm playing the game, I'm thinking of Onward, and it was like, fuck, I want to see that again already. And I just saw it like 4 days ago. So this is one I definitely want to own, although, I'm sure it'll be on Disney Plus, but yeah, really, really good stuff. Can't wait to see it again.
I'm thinking of the Ravens Point stuff. That stuff was awesome. That was a nice touch to have the Ravens as landmarks, and that it's very questy, and it's very kind of, it's almost a little like Myst in a way. You know what I mean? Like adding elements of a game like Myst, a puzzle game like Myst. So I like that.
From a like D&D or Magic the Gathering, any of those different, like any of the different source material things, like as much as like the source material is about like fighting the dragons or fighting the gelatinous cubes or bashing the skeletons or whatever it happens to be, the typical D&D game is go to a place, solve a puzzle, figure out where to go next, fight a thing. Like that is the world of these types of games, is the adventure and the exploration. And the fact that this story gave us, in a very urban setting, like there's cities and roads, a place where you typically feel that like exploration and adventure aren't really as like appropriate. They found a way to pull that in and make it feel like the most D&D ass story ever, even in this like modern fantasy adjacent setting. I thought that was super clever.
Yeah. I didn't even end up knocking the movie for pulling two of the Dorothy, you could have gone home at all along moments of, Ian, his brother, being his father the whole time, and the quest taking them right back to where they started. I wasn't mad at the movie for it. Typically I would be at other movies, but they did it well. So tip of the hat.
Yep.
All right. Well, I'm about to pass out, so I hope you guys don't mind, but I think I'd like to go ahead and wrap things up if you guys are on board. Big thank you to everybody that joined us at the live chat this week. Oh gosh, you hear it coming in my voice. Sorry, guys. Thank you so much for being with us this week. Jim, maybe can let people know where they can find you online.
Yeah. You can find me where I talk about movies on Twitter at my handle at JJP Out West. Those are my initials, JJP Out West. And also find me on Facebook under my name, Jim Pugliafico.
All right. And Will, how about you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Whatever Cove. If you're watching live, it's right down here on the screen, lower third. You can find me on Facebook. My name is William Lindis there. And just like in real life, you can also find me on Letterboxd, where my name is, surprisingly enough, also William Lindis there. And then finally, check out the Movie Bears podcast website. I did a written review this week for the movie Wendy, a kind of a modern retelling of the Peter Pan story, but this time by the director of Beasts of the Southern Wild. So if you're interested in that movie at all, I wrote up a few words. Check it out.
All right. Excellent. And you can find me on Facebook under Brad Harris. I'm the one that probably has Chub Chaser Bear friends in common with you. You can find me on Twitter at, I better give the right Twitter handle, at iBradPro. And you can find me on Letterboxd at iBradPro or under Brad Harris as well. I'm bummed, Will, that we're not there with you right now.
I know. Oh.
But big but. I'm so glad that we were able to get together. You cannot lie. I'm so glad we were able to get together, and with sickness and work and craziness happening, still great that we were able to do this, and looking forward to next week. Will, I'm sure, as our social Facebook cruise director, will get a post out and let you know what movies we're going to be talking about on next week's show, so that you can catch up with them on streaming platforms or Redbox between now and then. We hope to see all of you next time. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you later.
Goodbye.